to share some thoughts about The Real Story, The Gap into Conflict by Stephen R. Donaldson. This is the first book in the Gap cycle by Donaldson, which is a 5-book series, science fiction, and this is almost like a prequel to it because it's kind of short. I mean, all the other books are a lot thicker, but even beyond that, it's kind of a bigger fonts than the other books, and it reads almost like a long novella. So this was kind of a quick read, but it's a really brutal read, and I wanted to share some of my spoiler-free thoughts. I do have a very short spoiler section that I think I want to talk through, and then I want to talk about the parallels between this and Wagner's Ring Cycle. So I'll have a kind of separate chapter for that, and that's primarily for me or any music fans, but maybe I'll convince somebody to go listen to those operas. But anyway, let's start with the big thing that you need to know about this book if you don't know anything about this book series. I'm not someone that I seek out trigger warnings or they even bother me. If I read something that I don't want to read, I just either continue or I just stop reading. But I know that some people, different content can be source of trauma for some people. So I think it's important to know going into this that this is, I already used the word brutal, but this has a lot of violence, and specifically a man being violent towards a woman, physically, mentally, and sexually. And it's continual. I knew this going in because it's known that it's part of this series that there's this violence in the book, and I knew that going in. And when I went into the book and I got to the scene where this first happened, I said, okay, that was horrible, but I got through it. I think I'll be okay. And then like 2 chapters later, there's more, and it's rough. It's real brutal. So if that kind of thing bothers you, which frankly it bothers me, but if it bothers you, you may not want to pick this series up. I've DNF'd books for that content before. In this case, however, I've been told by at least 3 people that have read the series that there's payoff at the end, that this is not just gratuitous, but that there's a purposeful meaning behind the inclusion of this abject violence in this book. You just don't see it right away. So I'm trusting that that's the case. And I think going forward, at least the trigger warnings in this book, I think are past. I don't think we'll see those the rest of the series just based on where the characters are. So I think it's one of those you just have to kind of get through this, because I didn't love this book, but I did like the book enough to want to read on and to try to see if I agree that the violence in this book is warranted when I do get to the end of the series. So there are 2 big things about this book that I think is important to just know going in. And I really like the premise. The reason that Donaldson wrote this book is there are 3 characters here. We have a character named Angus Thermopylae, who is this space pirate, and then we have Morn Hyland, and she is this beautiful cop, and then we have Nick Sicurso, who's kind of a rival pirate of Angus's, and those are the 3 characters. And Donaldson said that what he wanted to do in this series is he wanted to take a hero, a villain, and a victim and change their roles. And I think that initial idea is just fascinating to me. And if his goal was to do it in this book, he failed. But I think the goal is to do this in the series. So I'm really curious to see where it goes, because I honestly don't know. So I love that central premise, and I love seeing what's potentially going to happen with that. Now, I mentioned this book is the first in the Gap cycle, but I also mentioned that it's more of an introduction because you don't get much of the outer world. You get really a very focused character story, primarily with Angus and Morn and what's going on there, and then you get a little bit kind of Nick at the end, but not a whole lot. But you don't get a whole lot of the greater world. Like when I shot my TBR video a couple weeks ago, and I rewrite the blurbs to make sure that they're spoiler free. When I was reading through the blurb, like, yes, we got the 3 characters and seeing that they're back, but then we got all of this world stuff that I didn't know about in this book. So if you're looking for kind of space opera, I don't know if we're there yet. I think perhaps that it'll be going that direction in the second book, because that's the other way I was described this book, is this series rather, is it's a grimdark space opera. So we didn't get there with this book. But again, it's brutal, but it's short, so it's short lived. I read this in probably three settings, and again, even though it was not easy, I was able to get through it. So I just want to talk about one spoiler thing. So I'm gonna do a chapter here, and then if you don't want to be spoilers, skip this chapter and go to the next one where I'll talk about the parallels with the ring cycle. The spoiler is something I hadn't thought about until I'm buddy reading this with Jonathan over at Words in Time, and he had sent me a message and asked about late in the book here when Morn gets free, why doesn't she punish Angus more and tell more about what was done to her? And I'll be honest, I think I was kind of brutalized by the book. I hadn't thought about that yet. And now, about 2 weeks later, from when Jonathan sent me that message, I can think about that, and I can answer that. I think in this instance that she didn't want to be the victim. And I think that plays into Donaldson's hero villain victim thing, that she didn't want to be the victim, so she didn't want to tell about it. I'll be honest, I never understood that sentiment, how somebody who was a victim of sexual assault didn't want to punish the assaulter. And it wasn't until actually a television show really showed me why. And it was in this television show, it was The Shield, old cop show, early 20th century, early 21st century. Go check it out. It's incredible. One of the most underrated shows of its time. And in this series, a cop was sexually assaulted, a male cop was sexually assaulted and forced to perform a sexual act on a criminal. And it wasn't until I saw that character on the screen dealing with that I understood. And I think it was just a bit of being a man and not thinking about what it would be like to be victimized in this manner. And then that show really opened my eyes in that manner, seeing that, yeah, so it's understandable because it always seemed natural. Like, yeah, you'd want to punish, but you also, there's the embarrassment and all of that, all of the traumatization. You probably don't want to relive those kinds of things. And I think that's perhaps why in this book, Morn didn't want to go into those things. And I find it tragic and I find it tough. And I look forward to seeing in the rest of the series how she deals with this. And I would hope and I would expect, but more hope, that Donaldson does dive into those things and try to see this character dealing with kind of the traumatic things that happened to her in this book. So I definitely look forward to seeing where that storyline goes. So let's talk about the parallels I'm seeing at this point. Again, there's not much in this book, so there's only a few parallels I'm seeing with this and Wagner's Ring Cycle, the Ring of the Nibelung 4-opera series. So the first thing I thought about is I didn't expect that we would be seeing characters that represent other characters, like characters in this series representing characters from the Ring. But perhaps we have, because I see Angus Thermopylae perhaps as Alberic in the opera. So in the opera series, what's interesting to me is it's 4 operas, and if you were to name the main characters of this ring cycle, you would start with Brunhilde, who's in 3 of the books. You would probably say next Siegfried, who's in the last 2 operas, although he's the title character in the 3rd opera, the main character in the 3rd opera, and is perhaps the main character in the 4th opera as well, but he's still only in 2 of the operas. And then you would probably say Wotan, who's in 3 of the 4 operas, but one of the operas he's named has a different name. He's the Wanderer. Alberic is in all 4 operas, but you probably, if you're a big Ring Cycle fan like I am, you probably wouldn't name him as a main character here. You would probably just consider him a secondary character, but he permeates all of the series. And I look at Angus Thermopylae here, and he's very much an Alberic character. In the ring, Alberic forsakes love and steals the Rhine gold from the Rhine maidens who are teasing him because of his ugly appearance, and he becomes kind of an evil character in that moment. Not sure if he was an evil character until that happened. So I see some parallels there with Angus Thermopylae being this kind of brutal and not good-looking pirate, and steals something very important at the beginning. He steals the Rheingold, and that's the other parallel here. Is I think in this first book, Morn Highland represents the Rheingold, and it could be interesting because the Rheingold is important at the beginning of the opera, but it almost becomes more tainted as it goes through. So perhaps we're going to see a personification of the Rheingold in Wagner's opera in the person of Morn Hyland. And again, this is just conjecture because I've only read the first book. So I really look forward to seeing if that's the case or if maybe my predictions here are just way off. But with those two, that's what I see here. But the third character, Nick Siccorso, I don't know who he represents because in Das Rheingold, the first opera of The Ring, Wotan and Loga, who's the god of fire, Wotan is king of the gods, they steal the Rheingold from Alberic. So you can say Nick Siccorso stole Morn Hyland from Angus, but I don't see him as a king of the gods character, flawed king of the gods character. I also don't see him as Loga, the god of fire, who's kind of also the trickster in this story. Wagner takes characters from a lot of different mythologies and throws them together in this story. So I really don't know who the Nick Siccorso character is going to represent. So I look forward to perhaps seeing where this goes the rest of the series. Anyway, those are just some of my thoughts on the real story. I look forward to reading the second book, and I'll probably keep shooting these just to see if my thoughts on each of the books changes, especially my thoughts in parallel to Wagner's Ring Cycle. But again, if you're here and you watch this, thank you for watching this video. Single book reviews don't do well on BookTube, but I wanted to get these thoughts out there, so I appreciate you watching. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. You can also find me on Twitter, Goodreads, and the Fireside Discord. I'd love to interact with you there. As always, thank you for watching. Until next time, goodbye.